Greetings. Glad to have you on Content Evolution NuWorld. And today we're going to talk about a dispatch from Glasgow, right, from the Hugo Awards. And as you are probably aware, Hugo Awards is associated with, the science fiction literature, and is a pretty much a core award giver in that space. So Hugo's been around for quite a while, and there was some. We'll get to this. There was some controversy about the awards last year when they were held in China, but this year, this dispatch basically said we're disqualifying around 300 votes because we've detected that a third party bought memberships to the organization and then proceeded to tell those folks how to vote, and then when they did that, they'd reimburse them for the cost of the membership, right? And they, in doing so, said, we've detected this, and we have enough evidence to support that at least these 300 votes are not legit, so we're going to toss them, right? And it's interesting that we have seen, if you've ever heard David Bray's story, who was the former head of the FCC, and as Ben would say, is an SOB, right? Is a student of Ben, right? In the past, that he was seeking comments about some changes in FCC policy, and because he wanted to put into the mechanism something that would allow you to know whether it was a bot or a human. And there are all kinds of regulations that you can't do that, right? He tried hard, but as the comments started to come in, they were expecting a couple thousand. They got hundreds of thousands of comments, right? And it was clear that this was not coming from the general public. This was coming from some kind of bot mill, right? To kind of stack the deck in a particular direction. And he's too much of a diplomat to say I told you so, but that's exactly what's happened. So we get into these conversations about voting, and they're only about elections. And we're not on that topic today, but this is indicative of influencing other things, right, that we care about in our lives, and that's really the reason that we're having this conversation. Mike, we had kind of a precursor to this. Frame out the topic a little bit more before we go into discussion.
Yeah, I think this is, as you I think very gracefully put it there at the beginning, in terms of kind of wrapping this up. Yet another where you would think, gosh, a literary award, would how could they not have been able to prevent this? And the fact of the matter is, like a lot of entities, it's sometimes hard for your rules to enforce your rules when you're not even sure how the rules are getting broken. I think one thing to keep in mind, Kevin, I think we were discussing this. I don't think this was like a heavy technology thread that the individual or individuals used to create this, quid pro quo, if you will, with the membership. It sounds like straight up, how you might call, I think the technical term is social engineering, or just a long con.
What is it, Tim?
A short con.
Yeah, ballot box stuffing. Go ahead, Mike. Yeah, so you're quite right. I mean, I think they were using an online voting system, but that wasn't the key component of the deception and the fraud here. right? It was, it's like, okay, has this person got a membership? Yes, they have a membership, so they can vote. Okay, well, so there was stuff that was happening before, that they cast according to procedure,
But
a vote
Kevin,
look legit. Go ahead, Tim.
so the company, I mean, the awards company pointed or was very clear that they don't believe that it was not clear that the company was behind it. That the company were
Mhm.
receiving the votes, that it seemed to have been another source who used the bots to do it.
Right.
And that's an important clarification in this case, because that would have been one of the first concerns. Did someone in the company utilize a bot to create this?
Mhm.
And apparently they've had discussions with that company and have been very clear. Now, my understanding is that this company is no longer in the running as a result of it. Is that right?
When you say company,
Yeah, the
are you
publisher
referring
of
to the
the
publisher?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, yeah, not that it was a tabulating company like the Academy Awards, whether there's an auditing
PricewaterhouseCoopers.
company, hey, look, it's Price Waterhouse, tabulating these votes. Okay, yeah, I agree with that. They simply said what looked like the top vote getter is not the top vote getter after we pull these votes out. Okay. I mean, it's still in the running, but it's not, it
Right.
is not the clear winner. Right. And, that's the clarification that they wanted to make. So, I mean, um, it's just disturbing. I mean, it's not I mean, people have tried to, as you put it, Tim, stuff the ballot box in different ways, right? Put your thumb on the scale for a variety
Right.
of reasons. That's a cottage industry that's called K Street in Washington, D.C., in terms
Yeah.
of, lobbyists, right? And the fact is, you know, it's just opening the aperture for, people wanting to potentially game these things. And we've had, I'm trying to remember his name, but the director for the Center for uh, Election Innovation on here. And at the end of the day, he is an advocate for, hey, you know what? No matter how you do this, whatever system you use, it's still good to have a paper ballot.
Yep.
To be able to go back and refer to, if we have to recount, all right, recounting can only be done if there's an artifact to recount, okay, as opposed to, it's all, in the, digital sphere, as it were. So, the people who are experts in this have a point of view, at least, about election systems globally and being able to audit them. Ben, you have a question? You said paid
Uh,
agent?
the first premise to me is the issue of, as I say, it's commerce. It's commerce in general. It's not just the elections that are based on authentication and attestation. Who are you? Do you have a unique identity? And do you have the privileges and rights to do what you say you want to do? Now, we ameliorate that in our commerce in the past because we say you carry cash. And so if I give you cash, you don't have to know who I am. And so we have in buffer agencies, but those are going away. And for certain transactions, especially digital, we expect to go to authentication, identities explicitly, and attestation. Somebody's got to attest that you have the right to do what you say you want to do,
Right.
and the privileges for it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
if you were
if you
doing
take that
security,
as a first principle, then I think a lot of things follow. That's all. I'm sorry.
Mhm. No, it's a good discussion. I mean, when you're talking about authentication for, getting into any system, the security people talk about you know, being something, meaning that, you have, corporeal identity. I've got a fingerprint, I've got a retina that it can be scanned or something, facial recognition, something that I know, like a password or whatever, and something that I have, and that's a physical key of some type, that there's something to be inserted or turned or, whatever. And in many of the most secure places on the planet, you have to possess all three. You have to, have something, know something, and be something, right? To be able to, to get into whatever it is, the skiff or the Fort Knox or whatever it is that you're trying to gain entry to. We haven't applied any of that, to, these kinds of things because the barrier is too high, and in many cases, we're trying to get people who are dispersed, right, to do something together, and so the physical part isn't relevant.
But
No.
you have, I mean, the same principle applies. The principle of authentication of an entity. It doesn't have to be a person. It may be an organization, and whatever it is that you have to establish an authentication of your to vote or whatever it may be, and then you have to say, test. Do you have the right to do what you want to, what you say you want to do? Do you have the title, the privilege, the role to do so, the filters or whatever it might be? So I simply go back and first principle standpoint, Tim, I go back to the first principles on here that really you have an opportunity to test this. Go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just going to say that there's a couple thoughts that come to mind from the standpoint of the company itself, Hugo Awards. And by the way, not just them, other companies who are doing very similar award type balloting, is that this is kind of a wake-up call in a sense, and could become a case study, because there are technologies that are available that would allow them to detect it from the beginning and block it. In this case, it just went haywire, and what was it, 377 ballots were cast by a bot. But the proper process for any of these awards companies, and the only reason it becomes interesting to me is I'm about to become a judge for actually an interesting design magazine, and I'm looking at this, and I'm going to bring that up in one of our meetings, because they rely on the public's voting in a sense to drive what would be the top 10 that then us judges have to look at. But I think taking the Hugo Awards issue here and amplifying it as a problem that maybe that sector of the industry doesn't know about yet is probably an important thing to do, because those are, again, I don't know if you've ever tried to create a bot, but it's not exactly hard to do. But the company on the other end has to have tools in place to stop it at the beginning instead of allowing it to spread.
Right.
100%.
And Ben, to some of your authentication issue is also very critical at that. You've got to be able to identify, there's got to be like, and again, I don't know this because I don't know how they determine who can be participant, but authenticating them as a member or whatever has got to be an upfront issue. That's why it's surprising to me if that member had that access, the fact that he could apply a bot to it and then just continue doing more and more, ballots. I would think that the system should be set up to only vote once.
Right. Yeah, I think that the it was a background dispersion of buying, Hugo memberships, right, to be able to do this. Let's turn this, because you've just raised an interesting point, Tim, to turn the calendar back a year. Last year, the Hugo Awards was held in China. I'm not sure whether it was Shanghai or Beijing, but it was one of those major cities. And what happened was somebody in the government, as the host, told the organizers, hey, some of these authors have written things that are unfavorable to China, and we want you to not consider those, okay, for your awards, okay? And they did that, okay? And you kind of got out that, that some, titles were, set aside because of the host country last year. And there was an uproar, all right, with the membership. They just said, you should, and I think that the chair of that committee resigned, and apologized, for this. This is another kind of tampering, but it's limiting the consideration set as opposed to stuffing the ballot box, right? So they have gone from, oh, we didn't consider some folks last year, we apologize for that, to, okay, here we are, all right, and, we're being messed with in a different way. So it's they've experienced both types. Who knows if they will have a third typology of, interference next year. But they clearly were stung from what they experienced the year before, and are in a, what they consider to be a better environment, sitting in Glasgow. So just a little bit more background on, what they experienced as an organization.
Well, that censorship is a big deal. I mean, that takes away from the quality of the content too. Can you clarify
Tim.
because the government asked them to take those out, and Hugo applied?
Yes, they complied with that in background. They said, okay,
it's controversial at the very least.
Well, and we have, evidence that, there are large sponsor organizations of things like, FIFA soccer, or, other kinds of things, that when they go into China, that there are requests that are made to not say certain things, or to have their athletes, if they have anything to say about Taiwan, please don't come, all right, or whatever, right? So it's, there's a quid pro quo, right, that occurs on a fairly regular basis, right, when you enter into that market, or at least requested. And that's why there are some companies that, would not come, do what they want, and they're not welcome, to do business in China at the moment. I'm going to turn back, Tim, to since we're here, to the previous discussion we were having about NVIDIA. I heard a briefing recently that said that the Huawei was making chips that, from some performance characteristics, exceeds the way that the NVIDIA chips behave, but that there's no export license, and therefore they're all being consumed and used in systems in China, and that could change and present a challenger. Do you have any point of view about that? Because that was a new fact, or at least point of view, that I had not heard, and would welcome your comments, anybody's comments on that. Hearing none. Okay, so
Yeah, one comment I would have is I did see, I'm not an expert on silicon, you
yeah,
know, and everything, but I did see one video that even though they're claiming, 7 nanometer,
uh-huh,
it did not function as well as the Huawei chip was as other 7 nanometer solutions.
okay,
So, I follow this one lady who does a nice overview, and then I think Peter Zion also talks a little bit about the differences in chips. He's a big, talks about the NVIDIA chips, at 3 nanometers, and then then the middle-sized chips, and then the Internet of Things chips. And so, again, you get different viewpoints on it. But
yeah,
yeah, it'll be interesting. And then of course, NVIDIA, they have a dumbed down chip that they can sell in China and still not violate the laws of the US.
yeah.
And so there's
And
kind
Ben
of
put
that balance.
Ben put a comment in chat saying that China has every right to prevent export of their sophisticated chip, just like we have,
Sure.
rights that we exert, in the opposite direction. And yeah, 100% agree, Ben. I'm simply pointing out that there's a a non-economic competition, taking place, right, on just tech, right, on just performance, right, and you would have to actually accept, right, what you're hearing from different sources, and I'm not sure that I'm prepared to do that, but it's just interesting. So we had there you go, alleged performance, Ben. That's exactly you're being a better reporter than I am in terms of use of language this morning. So we had, again, we're not a financial channel, but yesterday, to be topical, the NASDAQ did not do well with tech stocks. And so there's something is feeling unfavorable. And I can tell you that, not on technology, but on other things, I am anecdotally getting data to support that CFOs are early clawing back budgets in enterprise organizations. Something that would normally happen, say, the middle of the fourth quarter. Hey, are you actually going to spend that money? Give it back to us so we can, do the annual report and take it to the bottom, is occurring here in the middle of the year. So that is based on some kind of uncertainty or wanting to reallocate those to something. And it's like, oh, we want to start a skunk works over here on AI or something. I don't know, right? I can't tell you what.
No, but Kevin, that's actually what's happening. Is AI is scaring the crap out of CEOs, and they don't want to be left behind. We've been asked by I don't know how many companies to interact on this issue of budgeting for AI. And the problem is it means it's got to take it out of other areas. A great
That's right.
example of this is what happened with Meta, because Meta comes out and was going to put quote unquote 10 billion into the metaverse. And he's now turned around and said he's pared that back and is putting a significant amount, of course, now into the AI, the Meta AI search engine or engines, etc. But that's actually the reason actually that I'm seeing it now, as opposed to the end of the year, is this is less about IT spending as it is allocating funds to begin doing quote unquote prototypical or prototypes, I should say, of AI models. We're dealing with one right now, which is integrating an AI customer service system that doesn't exist at the moment. And then Salesforce just created a literal AI CRM application for exactly that, that these companies, some of these companies are doing tests with right now. But that's a budget allocation issue, not necessarily a fear of the economy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, what I would say is to kind of further, what you're saying is if they're doing a skunk works, which says, we need to go over here and fund this thing that didn't exist before, to prototype or to do something, that's, clearly interesting. For those that are actually trafficking in large language models and wanting to improve them, absolutely. I think what I'm detecting for the enterprise companies that are the users of this is they're making, decisions right now about, well, where are we going to apply this first, as opposed to
Yeah.
it being a shotgun? It's a rifle shot of, okay, or we've done the illumination phase, we turned on the AI light bulb, we've illuminated the space. Now we want a laser. Okay, now we want some coherent light to go do some real work. And we're going to apply that to our supply chain, or we're going to apply that to our development process, or we're going to apply that to, customer interaction and satisfaction, right? Because, if everybody does a little bit incrementally, I think that the people who are strategy are saying, let's focus resources on something that we want to be known for that's actually going to help our business model. And so that's, I think,
Exactly.
the toying around that's kind of diffuse, right, is, people are getting serious about, we're going to put our money behind X, and depends on what company it is and what they're trying to accomplish. I'm sensing that there's less risk associated or perceived risk associated with doing things that are behind the scenes that create operational efficiency than customer facing activities at the moment.
Yeah. You would think though, with the recent cyber incident that affected, Kevin, you mentioned mostly enterprise users, you would think that the CFOs would budget for the push for AI to prevent something like this. I think AI has a place to do this in cybersecurity, and there's just not a lot of chatter about, for enterprise, even, or for very small businesses, to train the models to detect something like this. I mean, this costs billions of dollars. Downing all the airlines is a pretty serious situation. And no backup. I mean, interesting.
What triggered that thought, Suzanne? I mean,
just because for small, I think that AI needs to be used as a source to help companies save money, to prevent down systems like what happened. I know that happened on an enterprise level, but I don't know. I guess maybe I was personalizing, but it just seems like I don't understand why the CFOs, with the tech industry, wouldn't really push for AI, to prevent or mitigate the damages that happened, like with that cyber incident. What triggered that thought, Kevin, was you bringing up the CFOs and how it affected the stock, the tech stocks, and I don't know. My thought process immediately went, it has this something to do. Why is that? Why is it pushed pushed a quarter earlier when it normally doesn't occur until later? That I was just, I don't know. I just
I'm going to tell you, as an ex, strategy and planning person in a large enterprise environment, the fall planning process if you're on a regular cycle, a regular calendar year, the fall planning process this year is going to be very interesting. Trying to understand what are we going to do, with our budget next year. This is going to be, in my opinion, the signals that we're getting right now means that this is going to be really excruciating, and probably and for good reason, right? But it's there's nothing perfunctory about what people who are in those jobs are going to have to do, right, over from now until the middle of the fourth quarter. It's going to be really, really interesting. Doug, thanks for putting that document. The first time I saw that report was from Armin Ruiz at IBM. And he actually gave that report a lot of praise, that Meta, is it Llama 3?
Yeah, 3.1.
Yeah, I mean, he said this is a very well-written report, which is,
Yeah, in fact, I posted in there's a YouTube video channel I really like, which is AI Explain. And so it goes through in detail. It basically footnotes all the documents. So it's like the release blog and then the details and highlights some of the things. So it's, if you're trying to follow these large language models, I guess, speaking of China, in the EU AI Act, so like, first of all, you can't have it more than 10 to the 25th flops of training, or you start to trigger EU AI Act regulations. And I think the US executive order was 10 to the 26. And I don't know exactly how many flops of training is used, but my guess is Llama is over that. And Llama is also open source, so China or anyone can get those weights, and and they can use that the Llama 3.1 to train other models.
So back up for a second. I mean, for a layman, why is that level of processing intensity a trigger threshold for the EU regulations or for anybody paying attention? Why is that?
Because they think it's powerful enough. They were trying to regulate that. Okay, if it's less than that, then the large language models aren't powerful enough to do harm, right? It's kind of like, do you regulate someone who's 12 versus someone who's 18, right? And so in human speak, it's like at 18, that's when we treat you more responsible.
Okay.
In large language models speak, it's we regulate you differently if you're over 10 to the 25th or 10 to the 26th flops of training.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I mean, it sounds a little arbitrary, right?
And it is. It absolutely is. It's like a 18-year-old. There's 16-year-olds that can do a lot of harm, and
yeah, I hear you.
And there's 12-year-olds that are very responsible.
Is there some? Well, I'm wading into waters that I don't know anything about, so maybe somebody else can help me. Is there some sense that once you get into that level of processing power, that the system can start to learn on its own, as opposed to
and that's agency and all those good
feeding
things.
it information, right?
Yeah, you get AGI and the singularity occurs, and Terminator takes over the world. That's the concern, right?
Yeah, well, so there are conversations that take place about the intersection of the way that we're using artificial intelligence and the emergence of quantum computing, right? So the fact is that something that takes, a while to do conventionally, oh, look, we're going to apply quantum to this, right? Now, right, I've just, gone from breaking the sound barrier to, operating at the speed of light or whatever, kind of analogy, is that, how would you, is there any comparison to, traditional processing power versus, oh, well, we would prefer that you not apply quantum, right, to, this kind of technology? And because the conversation's happening right now.
Right. Actually, if I can share a slide, I can show a couple
Yeah,
things
hold
real
on.
quick if
Yeah,
you're
go
interested.
ahead.
Okay. So you know, the problem is this is politicians trying to do things, right? And you know, so you know, like the EU AI Act is 10 to the 25th. The you know, executive orders 10 to the 26th. You know, so they have these, but the challenge would be is you have algorithmic improvements, right? So you know, yeah, this is the best one. So you know, here's the compute for training, right? You know, it keeps getting more and more. So you're now at 10 to the 25th, 10 to the 26th kind of compute for training. But then you have the large language model algorithmic efficiencies, right? So, you know, you can have a 10 to the 23rd training run, but if you have a great algorithm, you know, it can do, you know, it can be much more powerful model because of that. So, you know, without looking at the overall, you know, algorithmic improvements, compute improvements overall, you know, this arbitrary number of 10 to the 25th, 10 to the 26th, you know, is, you know, while it gives you, you know, so again, it's back to the 18-year-old, right? If there's 18-year-olds that are very responsible, there's 12-year-olds that are responsible, and there's 26-year-olds that are very irresponsible. So, you know, but you have to put a number in some way, and the number of training data makes sense. And like I said, so here's the executive order. And speaking of your quantum, so this is what was in the executive order. Though
So
now
this is the U.S. White House executive.
Yeah, this is the White House language that they have 10 to the 26 floating point operations. And let's see, you know, but then they have a biological sequence data using only 10 to the 23rd, which I thought was kind of interesting. They talk a little bit about co-located data centers and, you know, so it'd be interesting to say who exactly suggested this language. And I thought there was some language around quantum computing too. But again, the Future of Life Institute, you know, kind of talks about what are the models out there. And
So-
I get the key thing here is, go ahead.
Did the feds exempt themselves when they wrote that, all right, for the stuff that, you know, the NSA and the, you know, other agencies, you know, have? I mean, there's a huge computational facility sitting out in the desert in Nevada, right?
Yeah, the NSA, I don't think
Utah.
has to comply to these rules.
I was going to say, I think that they're exempt, right?
Right. Though, you know, like the EU AI Act now is in force. And so it'll be interesting to see what Mark Zuck, you know, Meta does now that, you know, the fines start kicking in February 2025.
Yeah.
So, you know, around this space. Now, the other flip of this, okay, so that's going in Europe. Then in, you know, China, you know, anyone can take, you know, all these weights from Meta, you know, what they can do and, you know, use those to, you know, because it's open source, right? So they have the ability to use these weights. So
Right.
all this is very interesting that Meta is, you know, opening the kimono and saying, hey, here's all these weights, you know, we spent, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars doing this training, and here they go to here, you know, release it, you know, we're going to release the 18-year-olds to, to run amok into the world.
Now, I think under Title 10 and Title 50, the exemption, the exemption occurs under 10 and 50. I believe so. So that's why multiple centers, you know, can be built for the purposes under 10 and 50. Then there's an
Yeah, but speaking of China, I put in the chat, you know, that the China's semiconductors, you know, 5,746 companies closed, you know, some, you know, related companies. So, you know, China has been having some their own internal companies have been struggling.
Yeah. Mike, you remember?
Kevin, have you listened to Dario Gil? He's with IBM, and I was listening to him this morning. He presented to NSB, the National Science Board, talking, all about all the flaws in the CHIPS Act and how this needs
He's
to be.
head of IBM research these days.
Yeah.
But,
He's interesting.
Yeah.
well, there are, several centers of competency inside the company, but Dario's a smart guy. And has access to really smart people, all right, around him. Mike, I was going to say, you remember when interactive TV was new, and the whole, I had both, the Louise Nielsen side, which was software, and I had another team that was doing hardware, and the hardware people were imagining, these farms and farms of discs that would spin, when you ask for a movie, because, you need, have it served, on demand, when you wanted it. So, how many, they were how many, copies of that movie would we have to have, right, to be able to satisfy estimated demand? And Louise is over there saying, you guys are so full of crap, right? We're gonna solve this with compression, right? And of course, she won, all right? Because the fact is, you only have to have one copy of the movie, and you kind of take it out and you stick it into an active space, and you allow that to decompress enough so that it can go through your your cable box.
Right.
And when you ask for it, how many do you want? All right, and you just take it out of the active space when you're done. I suspect that the brute force that we're going through right now with training will eventually give way to something akin to this. I don't think I want to use the term compression, but I'll use the term that it will be much more efficient in some way, shape, or form with some kind of, soft technology as opposed to just brute force hardware. All right. So that's
Agreed. I think, in fact, as usual, Ben has a very prescient and on-point comment in there about, do we, I don't know if you saw that, Kevin, but, Ben posits, is the future of giant LLMs, or is it going to be more about how do I link contextually relevant chunks of smaller language models, right, to get to where I'm wanting to go, right? And I think certainly, Ben, that concept makes sense to me, and particularly given, what we're seeing happening with the environment right now in real time, and which will only get a little exacerbated if we start everybody needing their own, data center that sits on a river somewhere. That's going to be a big environmental challenge. Also, it just strikes me as intuitively a much more efficient way to get there, to figure out how do I link and interconnect multiple small language models for a given needs. And, Apple's not the be all end all the time, but I think its approach that they've kind of outlined with Apple Intelligence is indicative of something that will, if we start seeing the performance of Siri as an actual intelligent agent, really transforming the user base of Apple devices, I think, given what we know about how that company works and its influence on others, that may be one of the more important influences we see. It's not that we throw out research around large language models,
right,
and efforts that, like, Meta's trying to do with Llama, but rather, as we all know, no single one ever ends up winning out, all the way, all the time. There's going to be a federation, a series of these things that I think, again, where efficiency becomes much more important, where we're not always trying to solve every rhetorical question, right, that a OpenAI or a Chat GPT gets, but rather a narrower set of challenges. Ben, sorry, I didn't mean to be speaking.
No, I'm sorry. I get excited and was starting to respond. I get flashbacks to 1995. And you remember we opened in 95 with the meme of content is king.
Right.
And all energies were in pursuit of content ownership. Bill Gates went around to museums and looking at digital rights of assets. And I made a slide and told my students, if content is king, context is emperor. And when you look in 95 and 96, the Google IPO, Yahoo, and all of those are context players. And the winners ultimately are not content owners and content reservoirs. They're going to be the context players.
Mhm.
And that's why we are chasing giant cesspools that were already contaminated. Our own hygiene would suggest don't touch them. And so when we look at also the missing E elements of empathy, ethics, and explanation, the three E's that I always see missing in here, we need to bring back ontologies, especially for business context and society. And therefore, that's leading to smaller, more hygienic entities that are cooperative, sufficient to act like larger ones. And so I think that's where the tech's going. Other than that, I have no opinion.
Yeah, as usual. Good work. Then, you know, I mean, Tim, the Russian doll set, you know, the way that Apple has described it, you know, seems like an elegant.
Matryoshka. They're
Huh?
called Matryoshka.
I didn't know how to, that there was an actual name, so.
Matryoshka, yeah.
Machioska. Okay, there you go. Tim, do you think other entities will start to copy that approach?
To some degree, you know, what Apple, I think I wrote about this in one of my Forbes columns just recently,
Mhm.
but Apple's edge at the moment is the fact that they've taken an AI integration to the apps at the apps level.
Mhm.
And that makes a very big difference on the deliverability. And I just downloaded iOS 18 beta, I think it was a couple nights ago, and I can already see improvements in Siri and
Yeah.
some of the other things that are going on. If you look at what Samsung just released in theirs, they're taking a little bit of a different approach. But you know, the other side of the coin, where Apple's interesting, at least have an edge, is they own hardware, software, and the service stack.
Yep.
And everything, they can basically influence every level of that with their AI. In the case of both Windows and more importantly with Android, the vendors who use Android, you know, have to figure out a way to add their own AI functionality to it to make it work. But it'll be interesting. You're right. Apple's model is one that I think is going to have a lot of influence on competitors who are going to try to do something similar. It's just that Apple has total control of it, and they can
Right.
You froze up.
So Tim, where did you get the beta? You just went to.
He's
you went-
frozen. Suzanne, he's frozen at the moment.
Yeah, but you can be a beta tester, though, unless you're really
Yeah.
sophisticated, I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah, it's if you unless you have a second phone, right,
Oh.
that is not, you know, not your
It's not for the
primary
people
mode
who-
of communication.
Yeah, I'm not technical enough to be a beta user, so or I don't want to.
Tim, you
Don't want the
froze
headaches
up.
of being a beta user.
Tim, you
It
froze
might-
up, so rewind 30 seconds and continue.
In my case, I opted for the beta to be
Nice, freezing up again.
Yeah, no. The joys of the internet.
Nice
By the way,
fun.
6G is coming out in 2030.
yeah.
Yeah,
My team had already been working with 18 for about a month or so, and they said it was actually pretty stable, so I went ahead and did it.
Oh, okay.
Good. Good. Well, I'll take that.
Yeah,
as a-
one thing is actually I'll put a link in if people are interested to do health testing with an Apple Watch.
Well-
cognitive testing. There's a university group out of Washington, and you get $300 to do a test with the Apple Watch. But I do think healthcare and a personal AI healthcare assistant with Apple is going to be incredible. I think that will drive a lot of people into using Apple.
Well, wasn't there some, I'm trying to recollect, but wasn't there some privacy pernicious device that Amazon offered for a while? That was kind of like, yes, give us permission so that we can know everything you're doing, and the microphone's on all the time, listening to, and it was to give you some kind of behavioral profile about, whether
You mean Alexa?
No. It was some,
Wait,
is
are
that
you
it?
talking about?
Ben gets me. It's like I always thought that's what Alexa was for. Anyhow.
No.
Was
No, it was
just
something
building up the
else that
No,
service.
but-
you wore. It was a wearable.
I don't know. Did they have a wearable?
But it
Not
was
that I'm aware of.
it was for like mental health or something, that it would profile, and it would listen to you all the time. Oh, well, the way that you're talking,
Yes. Again,
I don't think it lasted for very long, because I think that the reaction was kind of like, are you kidding me?
then they came up with Alexa after that. It's like, okay, we'll soften it up a little bit. It's a
No, it
perfect
was
table
after
of
Alexa.
information. But
it was at a very attractive low price point, but it's kind of like, no, this is the digital Tuskegee experiment. Stop it, right?
But to Doug's point, I was just curious, Doug, I think that's fascinating, because that's, something, a topic kind of related to what you're describing is what I've been kind of interested in for the last several years, particularly in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, right? Is oftentimes that's what you would be told as a caretaker if it was your parent was in there and things were getting difficult for them as they age. Oh, well, make it simple, get them an iPad. I was like, believe it or not, that interface can be too complex for some folks. I wonder, that hopefully that'll be one of the things we see Apple really does do for humanity, besides everything else it's done, is some of those interface experts can start, delivering interfaces that are actually even easier than an Apple Watch.
One of the most
or
successful
any of those.
nursing home devices is this robotic seal, Paro. Okay. That doesn't do anything but make cooing noises and moves a little bit, but it's enough that it provides a typology of, companionship and touch that overcomes, what the folks in these facilities experience as loneliness, right? It does a beautiful job of that. It's relatively low tech, right, for what it does. So that just tells me that there's a lot of useful innovation that can take place, that can help beyond what we're doing right now. And the labor shortages that we're likely to experience, Japan is well ahead of us right now in terms of healthcare automation and robotics, pulling stuff out of the factories and bringing it right into, nursing homes, medical facilities, and, probably coming to a home near you. So anyway, that's going to be importable technology, in my opinion. I think that we look at the Japanese electronics and automobile industry. I think the next thing that's coming is this, embodied intelligence. It's the robots for healthcare and home use that will come from that part of the world, and we'll be using it. But it's being invented out of necessity, not because it's fun, right? It's because there are real labor, real demographic gaps, right, that need to be filled. And these folks are going to live for quite a while. They save for it. They have good, healthy lifestyle. They'll live into their hundreds. So Anything
my
else you wanna
mom's-
talk about? Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
I was just gonna say, my mom's 87, and she has an Apple Watch. She has short-term memory loss, and I'm calling her twice a day to make sure she's taking her medication. But one thing that would be very helpful, unfortunately, it's not there right now, but where she has, the Ray-Ban glasses. If I could see what mom sees, because she can put it. She has a watch. She has an iPhone, but if she could put on her Ray-Ban her iPhone glasses, where there's a camera where I can see even FaceTime what she's seeing, it could be tremendous.
There is no reason that the life alert technology that is simply a pendant, that you wear so you can press the button to summon help, could not incorporate a camera. Right?
Yeah.
Just like, the cops wear a camera, there is no reason that you wouldn't be able to have an integrated unit, right? That was not only the press the button in case of emergency, but was also, I can see what you see and I can hear what you hear as an opt-in system. There's no reason you couldn't do that. And should be. I mean, the fact is that is a natural augmentation to companies like ADT. They should be getting into that business right now, right? Because it would be more revenue. They'd be able to price it attractively, and they could probably get, at some point, the right kind of, onto the schedule, so it would be reimbursed by, Medicare. Because if you were able to treat the person before it became critical, that you were able to detect the edge of an event, then it's going to be a much less costly treatment and intervention than if you have to be hospitalized. So, I mean, there's every reason to think that that's a good idea, Doug. All right, but I don't think you need it in your glasses. I think that you can do it in a bulkier, less expensive, wear it around your neck version.
Well, Doug's speaking of the glasses, right, Doug, or were you saying your mom would actually have those?
Yeah,
on,
my
too?
mom be wearing the glasses because she
I
knows how
see.
to put on a pair of glasses.
Yeah, but I
Right.
mean, you could be wearing the pendant instead of the glasses.
Yeah, it's something that she's not. Make it as easy as she knows how to put glasses on, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
and also you have microphones. I mean, the Harvey Castro. I don't have Ray-Bans, but he uses them just for the audio quality to make a phone call.
Doug, I do the same. I love my Wayfarers. They're just amazing.
Yeah.
And Doug, the new glasses, Harvey was on a call and we were talking about this, the ones that are coming out in August. And if you buy, they're $300. And if you buy them and your mom has them, I think you can FaceTime with those glasses.
You can't. So who's coming out with them?
Oh gosh. Let me go into my internet, my history, because I'm buying those. They're
Yeah,
pretty
send me the link. It'd
Okay.
be interesting seeing that.
I'll
Right.
I'll text it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to
Yeah.
see the link.
Call me, buy them, because then we'll both be able to put them on, and he's going to walk through on how he's going to tweak the software to do what he needs to
there
do.
you go. There you go. Hey guys, wide ranging but good call. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us next week. By the way, we're booking some interesting speakers coming up in August and September that I met from the American Marketing Association's Service Innovation Conference. So stay tuned. We're going to have some interesting guests with us. Cheers.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Karen.
Sure.
Bye-bye now.
Bye all.